In this video, you are gonna learn how to paint different textures on your miniatures to make them way more appealing and interesting. Do you wanna learn how to paint fur, cloth, or even glass? All of this and even more will be covered right here, right now. But before that, are you one of these guys? Well, if you end up liking the video, consider subscribing. Okay, cool. This miniature might look quite good, but there is something that could be improved. As you can see, the chest plate and the cloth parts have the same smooth texture. It's not like all the materials in the world are made of this silky smooth gradient. In fact, the opposite. When you look at stones, fabric, hair, or leather for example, all of these things are painted differently to achieve their unique features. Generally speaking, the more rough and natural textures you are gonna paint, the more messy and inaccurate you can afford to be. The exact opposite applies to man-made stuff, like shiny armor or glass or stuff like that. And perhaps the most important thing that you have to keep in mind is that context matters. I am not saying this to stop you from judging someone's tweets from 2013, but for you to realize that when you're painting, different texture will stand out more when there is some other texture that is very different. For example, putting very rough and used leather right next to something very shiny works fantastic, because you can feel the contrast between them. Leather. To paint leather, you have to start with a brown color, right? No. You can actually use pretty much any color, like red, blue, green, gray, but you should avoid using really bright pastel colors because leather is naturally more muted and desaturated. The trick with painting leather is to make it very rough and patchy. Of course, you can paint clean and unused leather, but honestly, you will have a hard time making it different from other smooth and clean textures. So what I do is paint many scratches and wrinkles. At this point, whatever is your base coat, you can either add white or some other white paint and start applying scratches. Simple vertical brush strokes or stipples will do the trick. It is also up to you to choose how old and used your leather is. Of course, the older it is, the more scratches will it have. Your paint consistency should perhaps start somewhere between a regular layer and a glaze. But if you go a little bit thicker, we will fix that in a minute anyway. Additionally, you can paint little wrinkles here and there, which naturally occur as you wear anything made from leather. These wrinkles are simply small, inconsistent lines, and I will use less water here, since whenever you use less water, you will be more accurate. If you think that now the scratches are way too distinct, it's time to turn it down a little bit. Go back to your base coat color, add some water, and apply a thin glaze over the entire thing. If you are still not happy, wait for it to fully dry and add more glazes. On the other hand, if you think that the scratches are not so obvious, you can go back to your desaturated mix and paint them again. Or you can even add lighter color and make the scratches smaller and sort of paint them on top of each other. And once more, if the scratches become too overwhelming, you can fix it with a few glazes of your base coat. It is up to you how many times you wanna do this, or if you wanna turn down the scratches with a bit different colors, like glazing with a red paint or whatever to make it interesting. But this is the general approach. Theoretically, you could dry brush or stipple the leather first, and then wash/glaze it with your desired hue. If you wanna be real connoisseur, if that's how it's pronounced, you can add deep scratches here and there by adding some black lines around the edges and highlighting these with a desaturated line right next to them. You should either edge highlight your leather parts before painting these black lines, or at least avoid painting over them. Wood. It's pretty easy to paint wooden planks when it's so nicely sculpted. But what about flat surfaces? You can use a few tricks that can be applied to both flat and sculpted wood. So if there are not any wooden planks sculpted, I start by base coating that part with brown and sketch a recess between each plank that is gonna be here. After that, you wanna make these sketched recesses thinner by applying your main brown paint. Then the process is pretty straightforward. You get lighter layer, highlight the edges, and also paint vertical curves, just like you would see on real-life wooden planks. Wood has these specific patterns that don't cross each other, just keep that in mind, and otherwise you can add more as you go. I would suggest adding not as many as you paint with lighter paint, and still keep on highlighting edges between the separations. As with all things, it's a good idea to look at some reference to see how to paint the patterns, such as this one. On a smaller scale, you can get away with some mistakes, but when you're painting larger stuff, it's less forgiving. You can also tint the wooden area with some other brown color and even mix some different hues into the brown to make it more interesting. But basically it comes down to painting these lines that are very typical for wood. The texture will be even more obvious when you paint something really different like shiny metal right next to it. So once more, contrast between textures is very important to sell it. Now obviously you can apply these principles to sculpted wood as well, and it will make it look even better, and since it's sculpted, well, it will be easier. Glass. The problem with glass is that, transparent glass doesn't have any color. So to paint it, you have to take advantage of the fact that it's shiny. Most often you will either paint something flat like a window or something round like a cup or a vial. In either case, you have to work your way around the fact that you should see something behind. So in this case, we will just use blue and create a gradient. Essentially, imagine it like the inside cannot be seen because there is this reflection. When you look at box art of Marvel Crisis Protocol terrain, I think you can get a very good idea how to do this on a flat surface. On top of the painted gradient, there are also diagonal lines added. Perhaps it would be the best to do this with an airbrush, but to do this with your regular brush, you can simply sketch the initial values and then blend them between each other. So pick either dark blue or whatever blue you have, to which you will add some black and cover the entirety of the surface. Now I will add a lot of white to this color to sketch the lightest part of the reflection, and to blend these two together, I will create midtones which will be layered down on the separation. To blend these midtones between each other, take the color of the layer above and glaze the transitions. Do this for each of the midtones until you get a smooth gradient. Congratulations! Now you're expert at blending. Of course, this will take you some time, but you can blend anything like this. If you want, now is the time to paint diagonal lines which will go in the same way as our gradient. Select not as bright color and paint frame of the reflection, and then paint smaller and lighter line which will go only halfway there. Or you could pick the bright color and make the line semi-transparent. This reflection trick will be used for painting this vial as well. But first, look at this. Since we will paint some liquid, the best way to sell the glass look on a vial is to paint the reflections, paint a separation between the liquid and the air, and the rest of the vial will be either blue or a really dark blue, just like the windshield. The liquid here is gonna be some kind of glowy magical potion. So basically, I just create a bright green gradient and cut it in half to separate the liquid from the rest of the vial. Now you should already know how to paint a gradient from previous step, so you can use something similar. I just put here more layers and glazes, and I don't necessarily value sketch. Additionally, you can stipple on some dots here and there, so you can imagine some bubbles inside. And finally, we are gonna paint quite a bright line that will separate the liquid from the rest. The air inside is gonna be first painted with dark blue, and as we approach the top, we will use lighter blue. Since glass is supposed to be shiny, there will be multiple reflections. First one is gonna be your thickest, and that's gonna be the one from the light source. I have already talked about the golden angle and finding where does the light hit the miniature in my previous videos, but basically imagine what will be the main angle of your miniature, which you will post on Instagram, and imagine from which way does the light come from. In this case, I choose to place the main reflection here, and there are gonna be thinner reflections from other sides. Usually you should use pure white paint with added water, but you could also add a bit of the color used for the liquid inside. Don't forget to paint this reflection all the way up and highlight the edges with either really light blue or pure white depending on the placement of the reflections. You can always add some reflections here and there because it mostly depends on the environment, but I would also always look at some reference picture. Chipping and damage. This texture is perfect to spice up things like vehicles or space marine armor. Anything in real life that has a hard paint coat over it can potentially start chipping. So let's look at reference photos. At first, scratches start exposing lighter layer underneath, and if you go deep enough, it gets darker. Depending on the material, you will be able to see metallic parts exposed or even see darker parts right away. Multiple things can work. I will demonstrate chipping where the lighter color is used for initial scratches first, and then darker color will be shown underneath. As with all things, there is not a single way to do this, but I would stick to either good old brush or a sponge. For the sponge, make sure that the surface is not even, so feel free to tear it apart. Dip the sponge into a lighter paint than is your base coat color, and make sure that you get rid of almost all of the paint, as you really want to make it produce small dots. After that, start applying the paint using repeated stippling motion. The only thing to keep in mind here is to concentrate on areas that would naturally be more exposed and damaged instead of hidden parts. For example, it's a good idea to concentrate the damage around the tires, or if you are painting a space marine, around the legs and feet. Damage around armpit would be less usual. If you wanna do this with your brush, you can use the same stippling motion, still concentrate on the edges and exposed parts, and you can also paint some lines as scratches. These can be also done as irregular lines, since the impact with an object can leave very random damage. Now you can add deeper scratches by going for darker color, like dark gray, dark brown, or even black can be good. You should do the same as in the previous step, but now I would certainly just stick to brush. since you wanna place darker paint just around the already chipped parts. You can also paint scratches like this and follow any lines made like this with lighter paint, since the scratches will also leave part of the material exposed to light. This was actually done with leather scratches as well, since all deeper scratches work like this, no matter the material. For example, even damage on a glass surface works like this. You can paint fissure with a black paint and highlight the bottom spiky parts, since they have now become edges that are exposed to light. I outline all edges as well, but with a more gray color. The bottom ones, however, are highlighted with a really light gray or blue, and the very tips can have a small white dot on them. Cloth. Generally, painting any fabric and cloth can come down to painting a simple gradient, but you don't have to be as precise. It's not like the light is reflected as smoothly as on metal, so it's more forgiving. So if you choose to build all the volume with stippling, it can actually work very nicely. And if you are rough and don't add too many midtones for smoothness, you can get sort of used and weathered look. So in this case, it really depends on whether you want your material to be very new and smooth, or if you wanna get more weathered look or anything in between. However, keep in mind that since most cloth materials are not super reflective, you don't wanna paint too high of a contrast in close proximity. That would be more suitable for non-metallic metal. For example, right here I will choose very simple layering approach, which is very similar to the one I have used for my painting faces video. This works well since skin tones can have similar reflectivity as average fabric, but don't have as many bulges. So as always, when I am layering, I start with a dark base coat and I will progressively add lighter and lighter color to highlight less and less surface. If you apply thin enough layers, you don't really have to glaze the transitions. And also, cloth doesn't have to have a perfect blend. This also means that if you wanna combine this approach with stippling, it's not an issue. So feel free to stipple here and there random little dots on top of your highlights. Wet blending can also be an option here, since I don't really consider wet blending to be super accurate, as it can leave some brush strokes here and there, so it's not really such a big deal on fabric. Feathering is also very friendly on fabric, since it's essentially just secondary blending technique and won't leave you necessarily with super smooth gradient. By the way, if you want me to make a video on feathering, let me know. But I consider it very easy, since you are essentially smudging existing paint that is still wet and spreading it to create a gradient. Of course, you can even stipple here and there on top of that as well. I have already mentioned this multiple times, but context matters, and you will be able to really sell the fabric look when you compare it to other textures. So having smooth and reflective things right next to it will make it obvious that it's not nearly as much smooth and shiny. And having dirty and rough things right next to it will make it look cleaner than those as well. Fur. There are two main similarities that you can draw from our wood example. For one, most of wood and fur texture should be already sculpted, which is the case here, but not here. Also, you will mostly use little lines if these things are not sculpted. Very easy approach that you could use for fur is to base coat it, use a wash, and then dry brush it. What I prefer, however, is to start dark already and progressively pick out the elevated parts. You could do this by edge highlighting, since, you know, edge highlighting is really just controlled dry brush when you think about it. Furthermore, since some places should be lighter, you can add lighter and lighter paint and dedicate yourself to using small vertical lines wherever you see fit. An obvious choice is the face and the most exposed parts. Parts that are not exposed will be darker, but not as dark as the recesses. The same process can be used for painting hair or eyebrows. If the fur is not sculpted, I cheat the system by painting plain gradient first and by adding small lines of very light paint to various exposed places, as you see here. Now I wanna thank Cobra Mode for sponsoring this video. Cobra Mode is producing pre-supported printable miniatures that come with D&D 5th edition stats and lore. All the miniatures are unique and have different outfits, gear and weapons, even if they are of the same race. Their Patreon is great for people who appreciate artistic detail, uniqueness and personality. The miniatures are made with a fitting backstory and all the little details reflect that. For example, this chemist also has a wombat card for her little shop that she can set up anywhere to sell her potions, and this diplomat has very serious and measured pose, in contrast to his meathead bodyguards. Personally, I really like the aesthetics that allow me to express more artistically than painting the same army man for 1000th time, and I am sure that this is not the last video where we will see these miniatures. So if you are interested in painting something more unique and artistic, or you wanna use some cute miniatures for your D&D campaign, definitely check out their Patreon. They are lovely people, as you can expect, since the miniatures are lovely as well. Now, of course, I did not manage to cover everything in this video, because there are so many materials and so many textures, so if you want me to make another video with more materials and textures, let me know. And if you are still one of these guys and you like the video, consider subscribing. and see you in the next one. Bye.